So moving away from loops for a bit, I want to talk about another type of data that can be really useful in our JavaScript programs, and it's useful in all programming languages, and every programming languages I know of has some sort of implementation of it. It is the simplest data structure that you can use, and it's called an array. So what is an array? Well, we're used to seeing variables like so, where we have let equals 5 or const equals 10. Let's do let x equals 5 and let const y equals 10. But what if we somehow wanted to group things together? What if we had a group of students and we wanted all their grades? So you could have something like this, where you'd have let student grade 1 equals 92, let student grade 2 equals 85, let student grade 3 equals 78, and so on and so forth. You can see how in a class of a bunch of students that might be a bit tedious. And so if all I wanted was to group a list of grades together, we wouldn't do it like this. We wouldn't do it in individual variables with simple values in them. What we can use is an array, and when you hear the word array, you should think list. So let's take a look at a array called student grades. And so the way you make an array is with brackets. So square brackets says, hey, this is an array, and you can leave it like this and it receives square brackets by themselves as an empty array, or you can actually put stuff in it. So if we do 92, 85, 78, instead of having these three variables, we now have an array, which is a list of all the variables. And so let's talk a little bit about this. So if we want to access items in an array, we can do that. So just like we could use the name of a variable to access its value. In this case, its value is this whole array. So if we go to our console, we'll see, hey, there's an array with 3 items in it, and it'll show us things. What we can instead do, if we want a single value, is we can add brackets to the end and get it by its position. And so let's have a brief talk about position in array. So if you have an array of values, what you want to remember is that arrays start at 0. So we count from 0 to the end. So even though this is the first item in the array, it's in index 0. So each of these is an index. Each comma separates the index. So 0, 1, 2. 2 is the last index of this array. So if we do student grades bracket 0, that's going to give us the first item in the array. And so if we refresh, we'll see 92. Likewise, if we put a 1 there, we would get 85. And if we put a 2 there, we would get 78. Common mistake is to say, oh, there's 3 items in this array, the last index is 3. No, the last index is how many items there are minus 1. So if there's 3 items, the last index is 3 minus 1, which is 2. If you try to access outside of an array, you'll just get undefined, because there's nothing there in the third value. You could manually add one, and we would now have a defined value. But remember, just count from 0 when you're doing arrays. So index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. So that's how you can access individual items. Just a couple more things involving arrays. So one thing we can do with arrays is we can add on to them with the push method. So we can do student grades dot push, so this is saying this array dot push, and so we're going to push something onto the end of it. Let's say we have a poor student and we add a 55 to student grades. Now if we console log student grades, we should see a 55 at the end, and that's true. And so now, before you jump on me and say, hey Michael, this was assigned to a const variable. A const means constant and it shouldn't change values. So const is true. If we try to change student grades to something else, we will get an error in our code. We cannot assign to a constant variable. However, when you give an array to a variable, a constant variable, you can mutate an array or an object. So when you just add something, the idea that this is still the same array, it just has more values on it. It's a little weird to think about, and that might not be the behavior you're necessarily thinking of, but just know that when you have an array and a constant, it can't be it can not be reassigned, but it can be edited. We can alter it in some way. We can put values at the end of it, or we can get values off of it, and but we just cannot reassign it. So we can't take student grades and change it in some way. And so that's the meat of arrays for now. In the next video, we'll talk about looping through them.